Hey everyone. I know we have different board games on this channel, Aeronautica, Star Wars Legion, Warhammer 40k, but I want to introduce you to Blood Bowl, the game of fantasy football. This is probably my favorite board game of all time. I am pretty biased because I'm pretty good myself. And so today I wanted to kind of teach you the basics of it. Now, if you're visiting my channel for the first time, hopefully you like how I explain the game. I know I'm personally someone who likes to see it. I learn things through seeing other people play it, because I've seen some other Blood Bowl videos where they just tell you what to do and they don't really show you what happens on the board. So this is for you if you would like. However, this is also for me personally because I run leagues as well as tournaments. So I plan to use this video and the next few videos in the future to kind of just show people the very basics of the game, see if they like it, etc. So yeah, check out the next. Let's just get into it. Let's get into the basics. So when it comes to playing Blood Bowl, the first thing you're going to need is the rules. If you have the starter sets, you can get it from there, or you can pick up the Almanac or these Death Zone seasons. The main thing is that they come with little sheets on like what team to play and all their stats. If you are participating in one of my leagues or tournaments, you don't have to worry about that. We go through a draft to pick your teams, so you don't have to worry about that. You would then fill your roster up. So here we have team name, the race, the treasury, the fan factor that represents like how good at marketing you are and how many fans you can come to get out for your games. Your rerolls, your cheerleaders, apothecaries. Apothecaries can pretty much help you with any injuries because in this game your players can get hurt. So this allows you to potentially save a player from potentially dying or losing a permanent stat. Cheerleaders and assistant coaches, they help you with the fan roll. We'll get to that later. The fan factor, you normally want to have a high fan factor. There will be some events during the game that whoever has the most fans has a more likely chance of winning. Now for the rerolls, one mechanic that we will talk about further in this game is that when you fail at something, you tend to have something called a turnover, in which your turn is immediately over and it's your opponent's turn to activate his players. So you can potentially start your turn, mess up with the first thing you do, and now it's your opponent's turn. Well, a reroll will let you reroll the die to not let that happen. So the normal Blood Bowl team has anywhere from 11 to 16 players. You need at least 11 players on the pitch to play the game. And these are marked by various positions depending on whatever team you picked. So for example, here I have the human team. We've got linemen, throwers, catchers, and blitzers. So those are just some of the different positions that can make up a team. Now, various other teams have more specialized positions. This is really easy to compare to American football. You've got, again, the lineman, thrower, catcher, blitzer. Sounds like pretty simple things. Whereas if you get to other factions, they're going to have more complex positions. And now when it comes to the stats in Blood Bowl aren't that complicated. There's only 4 of them. Movements, how far a character can move. So with these linemen right here, they're on 1 square. They can move 6 in any direction. So diagonal still counts as just 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Realistically, you wouldn't do that. It would just be 1, 2, 3. You go diagonal. Any player in any position can attempt to go for it. Which, if you want to think about it, it's kind of like a little sprint. So this is when you go past your movement allowance by 1 square, and you can roll a d6 on anything but a 1, so a 2 or better. They're fine, but on a 1 they fall over on where they're going, and they suffer an armor roll. Now, that brings us to the armor stat right here. So this represents how sturdy your player is. Whenever the player gets knocked down for any reason, they have to take an armor roll. If the armor roll is higher than their armor, they get injured, but if it's equal to or less, nothing happens. Now we will talk about the injuries later, but so you when you're sprinting, you don't want anything but a 1. You want anything but a 1. And again, a player can do this up to 2 times. So they can go 1, and then if you decide that's all you want to do, that's all you can do. Or you can sprint a second time. And again, this is after you've used up all your movements allowance. So for this lineman, he could potentially go 8 movements because you do his whole 6 and then decide to go for it once and then go for it twice. Now the other stats, agility is how good you are at picking up the ball. The general rule of thumb is you want to take the number 7 and subtract 3 from it. So we would take 7 minus 3 is 4, and then you subtract another 1 if you are doing something with the ball. So for example, if you go to pick up a ball, you have to move on the square, and you don't just sit there and pick it up. You have to move onto the square that the ball is at. If you go to pick it up, it'd be 7 minus 3, which is 4, minus another 1. However, so this would be 3 or better. But if there are enemy players around the player doing it, you start adding the numbers. So for example, if this player is trying to pick up the ball, right now it would just be a 3 or better because it's 7 minus his agility of 3, which is 4, minus another 1, which is 3 plus, and that's what you need with the D6. However, if you had an enemy near him in something called his tackle zones, then for every enemy near, you start adding. So in this case, we have this orc that's trying to cover him as he's picking up the ball. So again, we do 7 minus 3, which is 4, minus another 1 for attempting to pick up the ball, which is a 3 plus, but now because he has someone kind of trying to stop him in his tackle zone, that is a +1, so that becomes a 4 better. Now when it comes to the tackle zones, every player has 8 tackle zones around them. It's all the squares that are around an individual player. So for example, again, this lineman has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 free tackle zones where he's got no one to worry about, but he has an orc in this tackle zone. Now this effect, as well as many agility effects, tend to stack with each other. So again, if we add another orc here, now it would be 7 minus 3 minus another 1, which is a 3 plus, but now we're adding 1, 2 for the orcs trying to stop him, so that is a 5 plus. Now if we're talking about the last stat, strength, this is how strong the player is, but it's more of a comparison stat, and by comparison you're usually comparing it to another player's stat. So these are special block dice that come with the game. We can purchase them separately depending on how much money you want to give Games Workshop. So this happens whenever you declare a block, which is similar to a tackle. So let's say this human was going to tackle the orc. You would compare their strengths. So the human lineman is strength 3, and the orc lineman is also strength 3. So whenever the strengths are the same, you just roll a single die, and whatever happens, happens. If there's a difference in strength, so for example, let's say this lineman was strength 4 instead of strength 3, and the orc was still strength 3, you'd roll 2 dice, and the person with the higher strength gets to pick the outcome. Now, that's an important note. The person with the highest strength gets to pick the outcome, because there are some times where you want to make a desperate play where even, let's say the human player was tackling, or blocking I should say, the orc player that has strength 4, and he has 3 in this scenario. you would still roll 2 dice. The human player would. But the orc player, being the higher strength, gets to pick what happens. So most of the time in this game, you want to be able to get 2 dice on your opponent. You can roll 3, but to do that, you need more than double the strength. So in this scenario, for whatever reason, the orc would need to have strength 7 in order to get 3 dice on the lineman, and vice versa. Now, when it comes to the results, we'll start from the worst to last. So this skull right here is attacker down. That is the worst one in the game. That is the D6 equivalent to rolling a 1, because in this scenario, the lineman revs up to block the orc, and he himself gets knocked down. And this would result in a turnover, meaning your turn is done. And it is now your opponent's turn to go. Or you can get both down, which is the skull with the POW. Both down, just as it sounds, both opponents would go down on their squares, and armor rolls would be made for them. So they could potentially injure each other, or one person get injured. This still causes a turnover, however, if you're the one making the tackle. Next, we have push, which is just an arrow. As it sounds, this isn't rocket science. The human player would push the orc into a square based off the trajectory of the push. So what do I mean by this? Well, if we take a view up here, again, there's squares 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if the human player were to push the orc, the human player gets to choose whether to push them here, here, or here. So the easiest kind of way to remember it is think about the momentum, the physical momentum of hitting someone. They'd most likely go here, here, or here. So, for example, if we moved the trajectory, all of a sudden the options become here, here, or here. Same thing, we can keep moving them. The options come here, here, or here. I hope you can see the pattern I mean by this now. Here, here, or here. And when a push is rolled, that's all it is. You just push them to whichever square you choose, and you have the option to follow through. You will learn as you play this game that sometimes following through is what you want, so you can keep the pressure on them, or you want to stay back so that player is free to do something next turn, or maybe you're forming a wall of some type. Then the next roll is defender down. That's the best one you want, because in this scenario, not only do you push them into a square based off the trajectory, but you also knock them on their back, and you could potentially injure them after you take an armor roll. And same thing, before you take the armor roll, however, you can choose to follow through or stay there. But in all technicalities, you choose whether you want to follow through before the armor roll. You don't get to see if he's injured and then, oh, I'm going to just follow through on that. The last one is defender stumbles, which is a POW with an exclamation point. This tends to trip people up, so that's why I like saving it for the last one. Normally, it will act as a defender down. However, if the defending player has a skill called dodge, that defender down gets converted to a push. So most of the time, defender stumbles will act as defender down. However, if a player has dodge, he gets turned into a push. So you usually tend to see this on more agile players. So if we take a look at the human roster, the catcher, they have skills, catch and dodge. I'm not going to go through all the skills right now, because there are, I believe, over 30 skills in the player books. If you have questions, the internet is your friend. And if you're part of my league or my tournaments, feel free to reach out. I will go through some common ones. So for example, the thrower has sure hands, which means if he fails to pick up the ball, he gets a free reroll without using the team rerolls to try again. The catcher has an ability called dodge and catch. Same thing with the catch. If you fail to catch the ball, you get a free reroll to do it yourself. And with dodge, as we've just discussed, it turns the defender stumbles to a push. And in this game, you sometimes have to dodge out of your square if your opponent is covering you, and this allows you to try again if you fail. Now, the blitzers on teams tend to have the block ability. Block is very useful in the sense that it lets you ignore this bolt down ability. So if we take the scenario with a blitzer and an orc lineman, and the orc lineman rolls both down, because the blitzer has the block ability, he ignores it, so only the orc lineman would go down. Other than that, that's very basics of blocking and stats. So as stated earlier, I wanted to talk about what happens when you do break armor and someone does get hit. So let's run through this scenario of a block. So let's say the human lineman blocks the orc. As we've discussed earlier, they're both strength 3, so only one die is rolled. Push. For this scenario, we're going to pretend that was defender down. So, for defender down, again, you look at the trajectory, 1, 2, 3, and the human player is just going to send them straight back. Before armor is rolled, the human player decides he will end up following through. Now, the human player gets to roll on the orc's armor, and again, for this scenario, he rolls a 10, because you need to break the opponent's armor to hurt them. But what happens if he doesn't get hurt? What happens if you don't break the armor? Well, when it's the orc player's turn, it just costs him 3 movement to stand up. That is all. So nothing too much happens. If a player is down, they don't have any tackle zones, so they can't impede anyone else. And obviously they can't catch, they can't try to foul. They're pretty much done until they get put back up. So, let's say armor is broken. The human player then rolls to see what happens to them. 8. A roll of 2 through 7 just stuns the player. So if a player is stunned, you flip them on their stomach, on their front, and they are stunned, meaning when it is your opponent's turn, they cannot get them back up. So the technical rule for this is that whenever you knock someone down, if they are not stunned, you put them on their back. If they are stunned, you put them on their front. Personally, I like to use little tokens. So here's a little token from X-Wing, of first edition. So I like to use just little tokens. That's way it's a nice visual reminder. Oh, hey, this guy's stunned, and he can't get back up. A roll of an 8 or 9, however, and again we got an 8 here. This is a 6. That knocks out the player. So the player gets sent to the KO'd section, which we will visit later. A roll of 10, 11, or 12 means it's an injury. And again, we'll visit that later. However, if a player is injured, if this in a tournament play, you let it be. If it's a league play, you then roll on a separate chart to see what happens. Now, this is where the fun kind of begins, because at the very minimum, they're just out for the rest of the game. They could potentially lose stats. They can miss 2 games. They can miss this game and the subsequent game, or the following game, I should say. Or And again, this is like the worst case scenario. You end up killing the player, which I bet that coach would not be too happy about. When it comes to blocking, I should point out that you can either choose to block or you can choose to move. You normally cannot do both. So for example, this orc player here can choose to hit the human lineman by rolling off the proper attack dice, the block dice, or they can choose to move, in which case, because they're in the human's tackle zone, they need to do something called a dodge test. When you dodge, it's another form of agility. So you take 7 minus 3, your agility. You get 4 minus another 1 for moving, for attempting a dodge in general. So it's 3 or better. And with 1 die, you can get 3 or better. And there you go, he's out of there. So then the orc's movement is 5. So we've taken 1 movement to move out of that tackle zone, and then he's free. So you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. However, let's say the orc player rolled a 1 on that dodge roll. Rolls a 1. He still goes to the square he's attempting to go to. However, he falls over for whatever reason. Maybe that human lineman tripped him at the last minute. He falls over. There's an armor roll that occurs, because anytime a player goes down, there's an armor roll. And that is a turnover. So it is, if it was the orc's turn, his turn would be over, and the human's turn would now begin. So you can either attempt to move with people, or you can block. However, once per turn, and only once, can you attempt a blitz. A blitz is when you move and hit someone. So for example, if this orc was here, you can declare blitz and move 1, 2, and for the third movement, hit the human player. The blitz always needs 1 movement to be completed. So again, he's over here, and he's using 1, 2 movement, and 3 for the blitz. And let's say he does end up knocking the human player down. He can follow through if he wants to or not for free, and he can keep going. So out of his 5 movement, he has used 3 so far. So then the orc player can go 4, 5. Simple enough. So one of the most crucial aspects to Blood Bowl is learning how to support a block. So what does supporting a block mean? Well, again, in this scenario we have lineman on lineman right here, but we have a second human lineman that is 1 square away from the others. Now, technically, when a block occurs, you take a look at any supporting players. People get very confused at first. You look at the defender's tackle zones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and your opponent gets +1 strength for each enemy you have in that tackle zone. So for example, this human player is normally strength 3, and this orc player is strength 3. However, because there is one human player in the orc's tackle zone, the lineman is hitting as if he had strength 4. Now this is crucial because, as we've discussed earlier, this difference in strength allows you to roll 2 dice and pick the higher outcome. It's the supporting is based off the defender, not the attacker. Many people think, well, if I have my buddies next to me, I can hit at strength 4. No, you want your allies around the defender. It's all about the defender's tackle zones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The defender being the orc in this case. And same thing for the orc. So for example, if we grab another orc teammate and put him in one of the lineman's tackle zones, again, the tackle zones being the areas, the squares outside or around the player, this is actually even because, again, it's technically strength 3, but a boosted strength 4 with having 1 support on this orc. Then the orc also has 1 support because he's got himself as strength 3 and 1 support here. However, you cannot support if you yourself are busy being guarded. So, again, in this example, let's say we have another human here. It's still strength 4 for this lineman and strength 3 for this orc. A player cannot support if they themselves have another enemy that is in their tackle zones. So again, this goblin's tackle zones would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You don't include the people involved in the tackle, the block, but you have to examine allies and enemies around their tackle zones and potentially even supporting players' tackle zones. So this is your dugout. The dugout is pretty simple. You have your score counter up here using some marker of some type. So as you score touchdowns, you just move it down 1, 2, 3. You have your 2 halves. So Blood Bowl is a game of 16 turns with 2 halves, each consisting of 8 halves. So again, you need some turn counter to keep track of the turns. When your turn starts, the very first thing you should do, even if you have some crazy plan or tactic ready, is moving your turn counter. There's technically a rule where your opponent gets a free reroll if you forget to move it. I know a lot of tournaments don't do that, but it's used as a deterrent to forget to move your turn counter. Next, we have your rerolls down here. The rerolls you buy when you make your team, and again, that represents, you can use them at any time to reroll a die that you did not like. So this represents how good you are as a coach, that your players will listen to you. So if that orc that did that dodge test earlier rolled a 1, say I really need that play, I can spend a reroll, and I can reroll and hopefully get something better. That would not have worked, but there you go. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it still doesn't work out. It's whatever the dice gods want. Now, when it comes to rerolls, I've seen multiple things. Some people will, so let's say this team has 3 rerolls. Some people will put the marker on 3 and just move it down as they use it. Some people start here and will just use them, move down as they use it. Personally, I think the most effective way, and what I see at tournaments a lot, is having a set number for each one and then placing them on the turns that you use them, because you only get 1 reroll per turn anyway. So this allows you to keep track of which ones have got used and when you've used them, rather than potentially, oh, I forgot to just move it down, or did I really use 2 because I don't remember. And then when it comes to up here, you have your reserves. So these are players that you just don't have on the pitch, because as discussed earlier, a team can have up to 16 players, but you field up to 11 at a time. So this just might have reserves, like if you don't want your thrower being in when you guys aren't trying to score, for example. Right here, just a coach model. Obviously, for the people who know Blood Bowl, this is a star player, which I can talk about later. But at least if you're part of our Blood Bowl league, I like to encourage to have some form of model as your coach, representing you from the sidelines, coaching your team on. Then you have your KO'd section. So this is where that orc ended up that got hit. When a player is KO'd at the end of each drive, and a drive is defined as from the start of play until someone scores or until halftime, at the end of each drive, you can roll a d6, and on a 4 or better, they come back into play. So he rolled a 3, he would stay out here, but he would get to try again at the end of the next drive. Then over here, 10 through 12, you have the injured section. If a player is injured, they're not coming back for the rest of the match. That's definitely where you don't want your players here, but you also want to send opponent players here. So the dugout is pretty simple. So now this brings us to the pitch itself. Each half is 13 squares by 15. 15 wide, 13 long, making the whole pitch 26 squares long with 15 wide. I'm going to move for a second. Rules about setting up are pretty simple. Again, you need to field 11 players. There's only 3 rules really. You need a minimum of 3 players on this line of scrimmage. So on this pitch, it's pretty easy to see. You've got this line showing one of the halves. And the line of scrimmage is not this whole line. It's between these 2 wide zone markers. So on the sides right here, you have your wide zones. And the only rule for those is that you can have 0 to 2 players per wide zone, meaning you could have none if you so choose so, but a maximum of 2. So again, when it comes to setting up, there's literally just 2 rules, just 2. Minimum of 3 players on the line of scrimmage, and no more than 2 players per each wide zone. It's that simple. So I'm going to set up some of the orcs and human players just so we can do a demo turn. So this is going to be our example of one turn for both the orcs and the humans. The first thing you do is you flip a coin to see who gets to choose whether they want to receive, which is on offense, trying to score, or who is kicking, and thus on defense, trying to prevent them from scoring. You can do this with an actual coin, or you can just roll off, and whoever gets the higher amount decides. For this scenario, we are going to say that the humans won the coin toss, and they are choosing to receive first. Now, I know some people may think, well, why wouldn't I want to receive first or try to score first? One strategy is that usually if you're a more bashy team, a rougher team, you want to give them the ball first and be on defense and maybe rough them up a bit, injure a few players, making it easier for you to score the second half. So if the humans in this scenario, they're choosing to receive, no matter what the score ends up being or how well both teams do, at the start of the next half, the orcs would be the ones receiving and the humans are kicking. And I say that because if the orcs are able to stop the humans from scoring, take the ball from them and score, the orcs being up 1-0, and we go to the next half, the orcs would still be the ones receiving. So after you determine who's kicking and receiving, then the kicking player picks where they want to send the ball. You take the ball and you pick any square. The safe spot is in the middle. It's called the sweet spot, is in the middle of the half, and you will see why in a second. If the ball happens to bounce out during the kick, then it is known as a touchback, and the receiving player can just give the ball to whoever they want. And that's, you usually don't want that. As a defender, you don't want that. Now before we do the kickoff, let's look at the positioning of all the players. The orc team has 11 players, minimum of 3 on the line. As a matter of fact, they have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0 people on the wide zones, and that is perfectly legal. They're having more people stand back. Whereas with the humans, minimum 3 on the line of scrimmage. There you go, 1, 2, 3, and a maximum of 2 on each wide zone. So we've got 1 lineman here, and we've got a blitzer and a catcher over here. There you go, perfectly legal setup. Now, for this scenario, we're going to say the orc player chooses the sweet spot. So what you do is you roll a d6 and a d8 to determine where it goes. You're also going to need one of these. This comes with the starter sets, or if you have a fancy mat, it's already included in that. This is a scatter and just helps you determine where it goes. Now, if you want to be superstitious about it, the 1 is always supposed to face north. It's whatever, you know, but that helps determine the direction. So the orc player, the kicking player, will roll a d6 and d8 to determine where the ball is going. So right now, thematically, the orc is kicking it, it's soaring through the air. A 3 on the d8 and a 2 on the d6. The d8 indicates the direction. So in this scenario, we have the 3 being over here. So you simply move where you were going to kick it, or where you wanted it to land, 2 spaces, and that is indicated by the d6. So 1, 2. Direction is indicated by the d8, and the distance by the 2. This is why this is a sweet spot, because if you had a 6, wherever that is, here we go, if you had a 6, that would get you all the way over here, which it would not go out of bounds. Whereas if you tried doing something risky, like putting it over here, a 6 going anywhere in this area would take it out of bounds, and me as the human player, I would get to just give it to whoever I want. So after determining where it's going to land, it's still in the air at the moment. It's going to come here, come down here. You do a kickoff event. This is not for the first half, not for the second half. This is anytime there's any type of stoppage of play, at the start of any new drive, I should say. If you have the starting game, there's a neat little chart. If not, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. If you're part of my leagues or tournaments, we will have these charts, so you don't have to worry about that. But the kicking player rolls 2d6 and consults the chart. So a 6 should be cheering fans. So cheering fans, and again, you don't have to memorize cheering fans because there's so many different kickoff events. I would not expect a new player to memorize all these things. But in cheering fans, it's really simple. Each player rolls a d3 and adds their fame. So 2, 1, and whoever has the most gets a free reroll. When you start a match, that one thing I forgot to do is you roll off for fame. Fame is simply to represent how many fans came out to view your team over your opponents. You roll 2d6. Well, that was a poor roll. It's 3. But you get to add your fan factor. This is what we talked about earlier. When you're creating a team, you can invest into your fan factor, which is kind of like your marketing and how well you can get fans to come out. So if I had something really high, like a 7, it would be 3 plus a 7, and that would give me a total of 10. Whereas if the orc player went and they also got 3, but their fan factor is only 2, I would still win this roll off, and I'd get the free reroll. So once you resolve whatever event happens, then the ball finally lands, but it's not over yet because it's going to bounce. So again, you put up the direction counter, and you're going to bounce the ball just once. So it goes to the 3 again, but just once. And then once the ball settles, you're ready for turn 1, in which, again, the first thing you do is move your turn counter to 1 so you don't forget, and you can begin. So the humans turn 1. So with the ball ending up here, let's see, what do I want to do? A lot about Blood Bowl is risk management. Normally, you don't want to do the hardest things first, because if you fail, it's a turnover, and it's your opponent's turn. However, sometimes you need to do the hardest things first. So that line looks pretty tough to clear. So I think I'm going to first try and get the ball. Now, when it comes to tactics, everyone has their own different things. Personally, for me, even though the ball's right in front of this thrower, I think I'm not going to go get it with him. I think first, I'm instead going to activate him. So when you activate a player, you cannot move on to the next player and keep this player active. So for example, I'm going to activate him and tell him to go 1, 2, 3, and stay there. That's all I want him to do. And I'm going to turn him around. That lets you know he's done, and I can move on. So now I'm going to move on to this thrower. So by activating this thrower, I can no longer go back and say, oh, he has two extra movement squares. I changed my mind. Like, no, I'm going to go activate this player. He's done. Here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as the throwers do have movement 6. He's going to attempt to pick up the ball. So, I roll a d6. Again, anything with agility is 7 minus 3, so 4, minus another 1 for just attempting it. So that's a 3 or better. Got it. So he picks up the ball, in which I would just attach the ball to the player like so. Like so. I had to put down the camera because it kept falling off. Now, if we were playing an actual match, I'd be conservative, trying to protect him while I try and clear the line. However, because this is more just of showing you how things work, as I'm going to do one turn with the humans, one with the orcs, I'm going to attempt a pass. Now for a pass, you use this range ruler. Here is 4 segments. The first being a quick pass, followed by short, long pass, and then long bomb is the 4th one. So let's see what we got. We have a short pass. It's still barely a short pass. So, for a short pass, you take, again, the 7 minus 3, so 4, but a short pass is plus 0, so that's it. I just need 4 or better. And if you're wondering where I'm getting these additional bonuses, again, they come with the sheet right here, the starter sheet. And if you're part of my leagues or tournaments, we have these sheets at the ready, so you don't have to memorize anything. So 4 up, it's good. So the pass is accurate. So it's soaring through the air currently. Now let's say I did roll a 2. Because he has the pass ability, I get to re-roll again and try again. So that's why it's useful to have some sort of thrower or ball handler. Now, if he rolled a 1, let's say both times, snake eyes, what would happen is that he would drop the ball d8 to determine where, using this scatter template again, to the 6. So on here, 6 is right here. So it would just fall right there, and that would count as a turnover because that's a failure. So now it would be the orc's turn 2. But in our scenario, we actually did make the pass, so it's accurate. Now it's up to the catcher over here to catch the ball. So if you go to the catcher, in his profile, it's also 3 movement, or 3 agility, I should say. So same thing, you take the 7 minus the 3 agility, which is 4 better, but then you get a +1 for an accurate catch. 2. This would be a failure, so same thing. You would roll d8 to see where it bounces, and that'd be a turnover. However, because he does have the catch ability, he gets to, you guessed it, roll twice, or re-roll a failed catch. There you go, he's got it. So now this thrower will be done. So I turn him around. And the catcher has a movement of 8. So I'm going to move him 8 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, this isn't the best thing to do competitively at all. If you're a new player, please don't do this unless you can back them up by sending a bunch of players that way. But this is just an example. I'm going to choose to go for it. So he's used his whole 8 movements, and as we've discussed earlier, any player can attempt to go for it. So he goes 1 extra space, and you can do it up to 2 times per turn. So I'm going to do it again because I want to go far. 1. So that is what you don't want to see, because then you fail. Now, I will use my reroll for the humans to reroll that. So again, the human pitch has 3 rerolls. So I simply just move the one of the counters onto the 1 to represent that I've used it on turn 1. See that again. See? Better. Anything but a 1 will work for a go for it. This is for every player regardless of their agility, their speed. It's always anything but a 1 unless there's some weather conditions it's only the only thing that should affect the go for it's are weather conditions, unless I'm blanking on very specific rules that I don't expect the average player to remember off the top of their head. So he makes it. So he makes it 1 more. So he's done. I turn him around. This blitzer, I'm going to declare blitz. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and use 7 for the blitz. Blitzers do have movement 7, so that's why I'm able to do that compared to a lineman or thrower that only has movement 6. So I have strength 3. This is an orc blitzer. They have strength 3. So it's just 1 die. Whatever happens, happens. Push. So based off the trajectory, I can send them here, here, or here, because the momentum is going in a diagonal this way. So I'm going to choose to send him here, and I get to follow through if I choose to for free or not. In this scenario, I will choose to follow through so I can mark him. And I'm just turning him around because he is also done. Let's see what I can do over here. Well, in order to really do anything, I need to take some risky shots. But before I do that, I'm going to start moving some guys. So here is another lineman at movement 6. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So by entering here, I've now entered this Black Orc's tackle zone. You can always enter tackle zones for free, but leaving them requires some form of dodge test. Finally, this lineman over here, I'm simply going to bring him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's done. So let's get some hitting in. This lineman is going to hit this orc lineman for 1 die because they're both strength 3. Technically, the orc could get a support here because he has 1 lineman in this attacker's tackle zone. However, if you remember the rules, he cannot support because he is busy with dealing with players as well. So it's just even. See what happens. Push. So this lineman will push the orc. Again, based off the trajectory, I can push him here, here, or here. However, you cannot push players into other players if there's open space. So thus, I cannot push him into this black orc. I have to push him here or here. So this is a good example on why you might want to stay instead of following through, because now I'm going to hit with this blitzer. I'm going to hit his lineman. So it's 3 strength on 3 strength. However, I have 1 support on in his tackle zone. With this orc here, he was blocking the support. However, because he is free, he can lend a hand. So now, because he can lend a hand, I roll 2 dice, and I get to pick which outcome I want. Attacker down, and both down. Normally this is pretty bad, however, because I am hitting him with my blitzers, as we've discussed, have the block ability, which lets you ignore both down. So in this scenario, the orc lineman goes down, and I stay up. Whenever someone goes down, you roll for armor, no armor break. So nothing bad happens to them, you just get up next turn. And I think that's where I will leave it for the human turn 1. At the end of your turn, you want to flip all your players facing forward again so they're ready for the next turn. I know some people like to just have each turn they're facing a different way. Personally, I think that complicates it, because what if you just forget one guy and then or you forget a few guys? But to each their own, as long as you remember. So just a reminder, the first thing you should do, move your turn counter, orc turn 1. So if I'm sitting here as the orc player, this does not look good. I got a guy running towards the end zone, he's going to score soon. But luckily for me, he has not defended whatsoever. So going from the least risky stuff to the most risky, I'm going to blitz first. Let me see. The orc blitzers have movement 6. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, go for it for 7, go for 8, I can get there, but I can't hit him. I could take a dodge test with this blitzer, potentially get there, or the thrower could just go. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to attempt a dodge test with this blitzer. So again, he is caught in the human blitzer's tackle zone. So to get out, you need to take a dodge test. You always want to dodge out to free areas, because it's always a -1 to the dodge for every tackle zone that you're going into, not that you're leaving. So for example, if there were many human players, I'll take this guy as he's free. It doesn't matter that he's technically in 2 tackle zones. If I go to a free zone, that's the best option. However, when you move out of a tackle zone, it's a -1 for every tackle zone that you're going into. So for example, this, you take 7 -3, which is 4, minus another 1 for attempting the dodge. It's 3 or better, so I need to get. However, if I was moving from here to here, I'm moving into 1 tackle zone. So it's 7 -3, minus another 1 for attempting the dodge, but then a +1 for that tackle zone. Which is even worse if I try and go here, because now there's a +2. You don't want pluses, you want minuses. So in this scenario, let's put this human back. In this scenario, I'm going to go right here. So it's free, so I just need 3 or better. He's got it. So it takes 1 to dodge, and I declared my blitz already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it takes 1 movement to perform the blitz. So luckily, he's got 6 movement, because that is going to take up the 6 movement. It's the blitz. Now, the blitzer is strength 3, but human catchers are only strength 2. So that means I get 2 dice without needing any support. Push and both down. Because this is a blitzer, I have the block ability. I want that both down, because I get to ignore it, and the catcher gets to fall to the ground in pain and agony. So he goes down. The first thing you do is roll armor. Catcher's armor is 7, so this is not going to be hard to break. But I do not succeed anyway. Snake eyes, so he's fine. The ball does end up scattering just 1 based off the scatter template. 2, which is in this orientation. The 2 is just down this way. There you go. Now I'm going to attempt to pick up the ball. So with this thrower, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unfortunately, throwers do only have movement 5, so I will keep him there, and maybe next turn he'll go get it. Now let's hit some heads. Comparatively, the Orcs are much tougher in physical. They're a much tougher team in terms of their physicality. So Orcs are able to bully the humans a little bit in this scenario. This Orc that was down last turn, because he's not injured, I just take 3 movement to get him up, and he's good to go. Getting up is technically a movement, so I could technically get up and block someone, but that would count as my blitz. So if I do not want to use a blitz, I cannot get up and hit someone, unless there's a special rule, which I know there is one, but again, for the new players, don't worry about that. This Black Orc is squared up with that lineman. Black Orcs have a strength 4, which means without any supports, that's 2 die again. So let's see what happens. Attacker down, which is the worst. We've discussed. You never want that. It's garbage. And then we have push. So the Black Orc uneventfully just pushes, and I'm going to choose, I'm going to go straight back. I will not follow through. I want my Black Orc there. There's a kind of sentry. Next, I will move this Black Orc 1, 2, 3 to go behind this lineman. So now here, I've actually created another support system for myself. This lineman is going to hit this human lineman. So it's strength 3 on strength 3, but because I've got one buddy helping me out who's open, no other enemies are trying to guard the support character, I get +1 strength. So again, I roll 2 dice, and whatever happens, I get to pick the outcome. This is not a very deadly game. Garbage and push. So this human player gets pushed. Based off the trajectory, I can put him here, here, or here, but as you discussed, there is no, you cannot push into another player. So there you go, put him back there. I will follow through just because I want to make a mess of things. So yeah, that's it for this demo turn. If you have any questions, feel free to look it up online. I will be posting some minor things that I've forgotten at the end of this. One rule that we did not get to see in the demo was a chain push. So as stated, when you push someone, you can only send them to an open square, but what happens when there's no available square? In this scenario, let's say the blitzer got a push, or even just defender down, that works too, wherever that is. There we go, defender down on this orc right here. Based off the trajectory, you can send them 1, 2, or 3, and all 3 are taken up. You can then do a chain push. So you still choose where you want them to go, and then you can push that person based off the trajectory. So this orc gets hit. I'm going to choose this player. So then this player can get pushed to 1, 2, or 3, again based off the trajectory of momentum. So I'm going to go here. So I still get to down him and push him, and then he gets pushed out wherever I want to go based off the trajectory of that one again. And then I get to choose whether or not I want to follow through, but again, I don't think this is the best scenario to follow through on, because then he's going to get clobbered. We also did not discuss that you can actually push players off the pitch. So you never want to be on the sidelines of the pitch, because if this orc got a push, he can just push you off, and that is an automatic armor roll as the crowd goes crazy and grabs the player. This can only happen if you are parallel with the sidelines, or perpendicular I should say. So for example, if you are right here and you got to push, again, you have to send them to an open spot. So that would be right here. If you're right here, and again, 1, 2. The only time this would work is if you are right on the ledge with them. This could also work because if you push from this trajectory, again, the open spaces, if you kind of imagine them are 1, 2, 3, and again, you get to choose. So that would also work, pushing them out that way. Lastly, what happens if the ball goes out of bounds? So let's say he was carrying the ball and you push him out of bounds. Well, you would do the normal things for him of rolling the arm roll and seeing what happens to him. But then you use this neat little device that comes with the game to figure out where the ball goes in terms of the crowd sees the ball, they grab it, and they decide to just toss it in because they want the action to continue. So you roll a d6 to see where it's going to go. So you line it up with where it came out. 3, so straight out, perfect. So the ball came out right here. And you roll 2d6 to see how many squares. So 3. So where the ball came out would still be 1, 2, 3. And then when it lands, you roll a d8 to see where it scatters with this. So it could potentially scatter back into his hands. Let's say for this, they rolled a 1 for let's say for this, they rolled a 5 or 6 for the direction. And they rolled a 3 as well for the distance. Well, again, where it came in is 1, but now you go diagonal, 2, 3. So I have seen in some matches where it'll go out here, go 12 this way, then you have to do it again, and it ends up over here, or musical chairs of it coming this way, going out here, bouncing back this way, the crowd throws it in this way. So I hope that helped clarify how to play the game of Blood Bowl. I tried to give you a little bit of examples and scenarios rather than just this is how it goes. If you're new to this channel, you're looking up how to play Blood Bowl, hope this helps. Look at other places. Strategy is a big thing, but again, a lot of it's just practice. If you're part of my leagues or tournaments, I will make a separate video on the teams I have for you to possibly play as, but you need to have seen this to understand the teams in general. Good luck, have fun. Remember, Blood Bowl's a game. You can be competitive with it, but at the end of the day, you have to realize that your dice could just not be with you, and that's why you might lose. You could have the best strategies, but ultimately, the dice decide your fate. The dice giveth, and the dice taketh away.